with Julie, and I'm here to talk to you about humanism, feminism, and the invisible gender. I will be having 20 minutes, so I will try and summarize the main concepts as best as I can. Before we move into the topic, we would like to identify some of the core concepts associated with identity. Identity has many dimensions. It could be religious, race, class, social status, but the core identities that we want to identify here is gender, sex, and sexuality. Coming to the first identity, which is sex. Sex is a biological category that we are born into. So either we have an XX chromosome or an XY chromosome. So it is a natural category. But again, here we are questioning whether sex is really a binary category. We do have people who are intersex, who have 1 chromosomes or 3 chromosomes or even more. So let's question our definitions of sex as we move on. Then there is another category, which is gender, which is not a biological category. It is a cultural category, which is mainly the expectations, beliefs, and assumptions that the society expects due to our biological category. But again, we want to question the fact that does biological category have something to do with gender category? Does one's expression of, is gender only the expression of one's biological sex? What about biological men who express female qualities, such as the transgender? Again, is gender a binary? Is it that you can either express feminine qualities or masculine qualities? Can you decide to express none? Can you just be queer? Or can you actually express a multitude of both? Gender also has 2 dimensions towards it. There's the gender you identify with and the gender you express outwardly. It is not necessary that the gender you identify with is the gender you express. So for example, I might be a biological female who expresses myself as a male, but identifies with being a female. So let's think of these concepts as fluid and not rigid. Then we go into the category of sexuality. Sexuality is a person's identity in relation to the gender that you're particularly attracted to. But again, here we want to contest the definition. Is it only related to the gender you're attracted to? Can it also be not in relation to gender? Is it only determined by one's sex? Does it mean that if I'm a biological female, I have to be attracted to a male? Can it also happen otherwise? Also, sexuality has 2 different dimensions towards it. There is romantic sexual attraction and there's physical sexual attraction, and both do not have to coincide or be towards the same gender. Now let's move on to the gender systems. Gender system is the way we internalize the societal expectations of our gender roles. So at a broader structural level, what is gender systems? Gender systems are perpetuated at the state level, through laws, through religion, through institutions like schools, universities, workplaces, and also the cultures that we are born into. They set a standard for what it means to be female, and they set a standard for what it means to be male. And these standards are communicated towards through an interpersonal level, that is through the family unit, through our friend circles, and this is how we come to know of what are the expectations. And once we know the expectations, we internalize these expectations as being ourselves, as being definitive of our identity. So we think, since I was born as a female into this society, that I am expected to be more caregiving, to be more of a domestic oriented person, to be less ambitious than men, to be more of a listener. There are many expectations that are communicated with me constantly, not directly, sometimes indirectly, through the institutions I go through my family unit. So this is what we mean by gender systems. And gender system actually happens when I actually internalize this belief system and say my identity as a female is that I want to be a homemaker, or I want to dress a certain way. And to what level is this a personal choice, and to what level is this a societal expectation, is the balance that we have to always make as an individual. So the problem in the society today about gender system is not that there is a differentiated role or expectations between what it means to be masculine or what it means to be feminine, but What the problem is today is that are these gender categories limiting to one's individual's freedom? For example, when we say that women's primary role is caregiving, is domestic work, is homemaking, are we limiting their potential as intellectuals? Are we limiting their potential for creativity? Is what we have to question ourselves. The new spat of killings of women progressives and intellectuals in Afghanistan by the Taliban in recent January cases really is a test to the fact that women today, even if they have created a place for them in the public eye as progressives, cannot still be accepted in society today because of the very narrow definitions of the gender roles that we have today. Now, when we move on to the gender roles, particularly in relation to Bangladesh and particularly in relation to women's roles in Bangladesh, and I will try to observe it from a public sphere and a private sphere. In the public sphere, the women's role in Bangladesh is quite progressing, as I must say. Women's labor force participation in Bangladesh, according to a global gender gap report of 2020, is 36.3%. But the problem is the higher up you go the professional ladder, the fewer women you will see. In fact, the same report says that in Bangladesh, female majority ownership is only 1.7%, and where female are top managers are only 4.8%. What does it mean? It means a lot. That where are women actually participating? What are the value systems we associate with women's participation in the labor force? Even when you consider that why are women not actually participating in the public sphere, it is impossible to understand that without understanding the private sphere, the private roles of women. The private roles of women are related to what are expectations from them in the personal sphere, in the what happens behind closed doors. What happens behind closed doors, what is personal, is not really personal anymore. It is political. When we come to talk about domestic violence, can we only say it is a personal issue, it is a private issue? When we talk about marital rape, can we only say it is a personal issue? When we talk about acid attack victims who have been attacked by their husbands and in-laws, can we really say that it is a personal issue? Why are women not participating as equally as men in society today? When we look at the private sphere of women's participation, not only participation, why they're not participating, but also what are limiting women. In fact, a new study says, a UNFPA study says that, a very recent one, in fact, in 2020, that out of 3 Bangladeshi women, 2 of them have actually experienced domestic violence. 60% of girls today are married below the age of 18 years. At the beginning of 2020, the first 9 months, ASK, that is Ain Salish Kendra, reported that 235 women were actually murdered by their husbands. Between January 2001 and December 2019, over 3,300 women and girls were murdered over dowry disputes. When we think about what is happening to women in the private sphere, there are wonderful laws by the government. There's the Domestic Violence Prevention Act of 2010. There's the Child Marriage Restraint Act of 2017. There was a huge campaign of Girls Not Brides, together with 25 NGOs. What it means that even if laws are there at the structural level, people still have to change their attitude and value systems towards how they view women and accept them as equal participants in the society today. But can we say, with really looking at the real picture, that women are not really facing injustice? That can we really say that women are at an equal playing field as men, that they do not deserve certain privileges, certain affirmative actions to make them come to the same level playing field as men? And that is where we talk about something as important as feminism. So when we talk about feminism, people will ask you, why are we talking about feminism? What does feminism mean? Why can't we all be egalitarian? Why can't we all be humanist? Humanist, which believes in the fact that all decisions are ethical decisions that has to be based on empathy and a concern for all human beings, and that all human beings deserve equal opportunity. But can we really say that it's equality we are talking about? this is one a very important distinction that we have to make between equality and equity. I want to show you a picture here of the different situations of equality and equity. As you see in the first image, there are three people who are trying to view a football match. There's one who's the tallest among them, there's the one who's mid-height, and there's one who's very short. And in the first scenario, they've all been given the same height of, stool to stand on to watch the football match. But that's what we're talking about humanism. We're saying that everyone deserves equal opportunity. But can equal opportunity actually address all the injustices that have been faced by women historically? So it cannot. As you can see from the picture, the shortest person cannot really view the match. But when we look at the second picture, we see that the shortest person has been given 2 stools to stand on, and the tallest person can already see the match. He does not need a stool. And the mid person has been given 1 stool. That is what we mean by equity, whereby people are addressed according to their needs. And in the third image, as you see, the core causes of the inequity itself, which was the fence, has been removed. We have a long way to go before that happens. We have to change the attitudes and behaviors and value systems of people. Of course, there are structures and laws right now that protect women's rights in various ways, and we have made great progress with that. But we still have to make a lot of progress in terms of changing our attitudes and value systems so we can deconstruct what we really mean by gender roles, what we really mean by sex, what we really mean by sexuality. Again, coming back to the core concept that we talked about, that sexuality, sex, gender are fluid concepts. This is why we talk about the third gender. When we talk about the third gender, we're saying that for a man who is biologically man because of his chromosomes, he does not necessarily have to identify with male qualities, and he does not necessarily have to express male qualities. What does this mean? That he does not fit into the society? No, he does, because everyone has a choice to be who they are. And as we know, the trans community, which is umbrella term for persons whose gender identity or gender expression does not conform to that of a typically associated with sex, to which they were assigned toward birth, is actually recognized in Bangladesh as the third gender. It is recognized lawfully that the third gender is existing, and the law in Bangladesh guarantees them political, social rights to participate fully in society. And as we know today, the Hijra community in Bangladesh is almost 10,000. But still right now, we have a lot of inequalities that are being faced by this community, not because of the structures or laws in place, but because we as the society have not yet accepted them as equal members of our society because of their sexual orientation, because of the gender they identify with. Can identity be a reason for exclusion for society? Do we as individuals, as humanists who say that all human beings are equal, all human beings deserve to be part of this society, remove other people who do not identify as what we prescribe as the rightful way to be? Another great achievement has been made in relation to the third gender, whereby Boishakhi TV, on commemorating International Women's Day, appointed Dasnuva Anand Shishir, who is the first ever transgender, as a news anchor. Dasnuva has made herself a good name as an actor, dancer, and model, and we have to applaud the progress made by the media and also by the government itself in accepting these people as part of our society. Now that we have talked about gender systems, we've talked about the third gender and humanism. Again, we come back to the question of feminism. Why feminism? Feminism, as I would again reiterate, is not just seeking equality between all genders. It seeks to give back to women everything they have been denied for centuries. We know that there is a historic and systemic gender disparities targeting women across centuries, across ideologies, and across religion, that is related to practices such as female genital mutilation, female infanticides, forced marriages, rape. So in order to actually address these historical injustices, we talk about feminism, because we want to give back to women what they have been denied. And when we talk about feminism, it's impossible to not talk about the three waves of feminism that actually have solidified the movement. And starting from the first wave of feminism, which started with the Seneca Falls Convention of 1848, where 300 people gathered to talk about the social, civil, and religious conditions of women's right, to fight for the political rights of women. And starting with that, there was a progress of women riots and, protest advocating for women's political rights. And what really gave the first wave of feminism its win is when, during the First World War, men were being sent to fight the war. Women occupied most of these positions, and these companies, especially ammunition factories, farmlands, and distributors. This actually led to the partial suffrage in 1918 for home-owning women over the age of 13. And subsequently, in 1928, all women above the age of 21 were allowed to vote. Then came the second wave of feminism. The second wave of feminism had more to do with the social rights of women as opposed to the political rights of women. So this was mostly taken forward by Betty Friedan's Feminine Mystique. This book talked about social equality. That means that these problems that seems to be very individual and petty about sex, about relationships, about access to abortions, about domestic labor were in fact very systemic and political and fundamental to the fights for women's equality, which is still an issue for us today. And during the second wave feminism, landmark laws were passed which actually outlawed gender pay gap. The Supreme Court cases from 1960s to the 1970s guaranteed women the right to use birth control, gave women the right to education equality, guaranteed women's reproductive freedom. It was also a landmark victory for women's economic rights because women were first time allowed to have credit cards. They were allowed to apply for mortgages. Marital rape was outlawed. So it was a great progress for social equality. And the first wave was a great forward movement for political equality. Then came the third wave of feminism that we're still seeing today, which is mainly summarized with queer theory. Queer theory says that the categorizations of gender, sex, sexuality is very fluid and it's not definitive. And it questions the socially established norms and dualistic categories of gender, of class, of racial classification, and it goes beyond these so-called binaries to contest the general political as well as the international binary orders, which is probably democratic and authoritarian. The queer theory is also more inclusive in that it addresses things of race, social class, as opposed to the other first wave or second wave movements. So as we see, the progress has been made, but we still have a lot of way to go before we actually solidify this concept and actually accept every single individual as equal members of our society.